Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, How Miller Waste Cut Maintenance Costs by 10 to 15%. My name is Mallory Shapansky and I'm the event and content producer for the Recycling Today Media Group, and I'll be assisting with today's webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone that if you have a question for today's presenters, to please submit them via the chat or Q&A box in Zoom. I'd now like to thank the sponsor of today's webinar, AMCS Group, and introduce today's presenters. David LeBlanc, he is the Corporate Systems Trainer and Solutions Specialist at Miller Waste Systems, and John Davis, Head of Delivery Fleet Maintenance at AMCS Group. David serves as the primary point of contact for enterprise technology implementation, system optimization, and staff enablement across the organization, while John is responsible for AMCS's Fleet Maintenance and Management Consulting Group. I'll now turn it over to David and John to begin the webinar.
Thanks, everybody. So I am John Davis, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of our agenda today. So we're just going to talk about Miller Waste. I have a short video to show you here in just a moment, and then we'll discuss what challenges Miller was facing, what was the solution that was put in place, and then what were the results of that, and then we'll have time at the end for questions and answers. Okay, so here's the video. Just take a couple minutes and tell you a little bit about Miller Waste.
Miller Waste is a multidisciplinary waste management organization. It's not a garbage company, it's a waste management organization. We've grown from a 2-truck operation till today, where we're roughly 1,200 trucks, give or take, over 2,500 employees, operating in 3 different provinces in Canada, as well as having a sister company in Manitoba called Miller Environmental Corporation. We're a diversion company, not a landfill company, and I think that's a really strong point to be made. We focus on recycling and also on diverting other waste streams from landfill. Our company can be defined into 4 basic services. One is collection, waste collection. We also process waste. We process organics. We process recyclables. We design and build large integrated waste management facilities. So these are large facilities that would take recycling products and divert them. And lastly, we have a company called Escarpment Renewables that recovers gas from organic waste, and we turn that into electricity. And the interesting thing about that, the byproduct is a fertilizer that goes back into the farmer's fields and as is a soil amendment material. Anybody can buy a piece of equipment. But what really makes the company successful and makes it grow are the people that operate that equipment. Our company's legacy is built upon respect and honesty towards each other, towards our customers, towards our employees. We're committed to the sustainability of this business to make sure that this business continues to have a life long, long after us.
Okay, and with that, I'll turn it over to David so you can tell us a little bit about Miller and what the operation consists of. So, David?
Absolutely. So, hello, everyone. Thank you, John, Mallory, for the introduction there. Thank you, Blair, for that nice video of us. As mentioned, I am Miller Waste's Corporate Systems Trainer, Change Management, Implementation Specialist. You'll hear me blab probably a lot about that today. General high-level stuff. Miller Waste is a national enterprise. We're here in Canada. We're Canada-owned. We're operated here. We're in multiple different provinces across the board. As you see some stats on the screen, 2,000 trucks, 3,000 employees, 200 technicians, and managing all of this at that scale is quite difficult in today's world. You'll hear a lot about that today. You'll hear me talk a lot about the culture and the community that is needed to really facilitate a change management on this size at this scale with AMCS Fleet Maintenance. Some themes that I'll kind of foreshadow here today are going to be centralization, controls, consistent processes, feedback mechanisms that you can grab from the field and from leadership. This is all stuff that is facilitated, or we have been able to facilitate with AMCS Fleet Maintenance. At this point, throughout our operation, across all of our sites, all of our fleet maintenance is pulled through AMCS Fleet Maintenance app. So just about everything that we own, physical asset that we own, is now live in that system, in that environment. And throughout this conversation today, I'll take you through the story of how we got there. And by no means do I want to say that we're perfect here, but I think we've got some good adoption. I think we've got some good numbers there. And hopefully I can share some of that with everybody today.
Thank you, David. And what we're going to do is we'll talk a little bit about what are the challenges that you experienced, right? And I think this says it all, and I'll let you discuss it a little bit.
For sure. And I'll preface this all by saying that the challenges that are on the screen and that I'll talk about today probably are not challenges that we see alone. And what I mean by that is the field and the audience here is probably experiencing some or of all of these. One of the reasons for that I've kind of observed as my time here is that Miller is not in the technology sector. Most of us on this call today probably are not in the technology sector. But the way today's world is, we want the standards that are in a tech sector organization. We want the standards that come with a cloud-based SaaS program such as AMCS Fleet Maintenance. And there's a gap between the standards that it's seen on the best practice companies and the standards that are within a line of business like we are, like in a fleet maintenance. There's a maturing process that needs to happen through there. And you'll hear about that gap today. Some of the challenges we're seeing, you guys are probably seeing this too, and it's on the screen. We had pen and paper procedures, Excel spreadsheets, whiteboards in our shop. And to be fair with everybody, you're probably not going to get rid of all those overnight or even for the rest of time. But there is a way to make all those work better, to be centralized, to be more efficient, and to reduce the use of on-premise workarounds or procedures that are not given to somebody at a corporate level. With that comes with real-time visibility of your data. So one thing you'll hear me talk about today is it's like the idea of the game of telephone when you're a kid. If the data moves through too many hands and too many people are in that spreadsheet modifying the data, the decisions you make on that data become a negotiation. And there's no real central place where that data can live and for your enterprise to make a data-driven decision. So those are part of the challenges there, that we had no real visibility or centralized location for our data. We wanted to trust our data and to make enterprise-level decisions with that data. We wanted standardized procedures, and we needed a program that was going to facilitate all that. So by no means do I think sorry, go ahead, John.
No, I was going to ask you just real quickly on the spreadsheets. I remember that was a challenge. It's a challenge for every implementation we do when we're trying to get consistent data. Could you define, like, when did Miller experience that they knew that data was suspect, or where did it break down? Do you think it was the transition, as you said, between people, or just different interpretations across 45 sites, or what do you think?
It's a combination of both. The transfer between people muddies the data, for one. And then you also have that piece that you just mentioned, John, which is the interpretation. When there is so many different sources of where you're pulling your data from, you have different people using different formulas in Excel on different sheets, which are prone to error. Then, as I mentioned, that data becomes a negotiation at a high level. And that should never be the case. The data, you'll hear me say this a lot today, the data is the data. You got to trust your data, and you got to be able to drive enterprise level decisions based on that. So where the breakdown happens, and to answer your question, is at that high level where you're sitting down with the data, you want to make a high level decision, and all of a sudden you get negotiations or arguments. That's the point where you need to look at your systems and your pipeline, which I'll discuss too. And you got to ask yourself, what are we missing? Why are we negotiating over this get data when it should tell us a narrative that we can piece out together? And that's the gap that we were missing and that we decided that we needed to go and explore. A part of that is what you'll see on the screen here today. which is a big movement here for Miller, is centralized key performance indicator reporting, KPI reporting. Centralized reporting across our sites with data that we know is audited and we know is true. We with that, and I think another big part of this industry is preventative maintenance. As you can see, is on the screen. We'll talk a lot about that today, because that's a huge lift. If anyone's out there is thinking about taking on AMCS fleet maintenance with your preventative maintenance strategy, it certainly is helpful, and you'll see the numbers. It works, but it's a big lift. There's a big amount of data that needs to be pushed out there. Same with warranty, same with your inventory, and all of that is a part of the AMCS fleet maintenance package. And all of that previously at Miller was siloed at different facilities, doing different ways, reporting on different sheets.
Well, and I don't think in what we see, I've been doing this to say since 1983, right? So I don't think Miller was really any different than many companies, big, small, whatever. Miller's a highly successful company, and you're just trying to get to the next level and to become more efficient. We have a short poll, and I think we'd like to know, like, is this experienced by some of the folks that are on the line with us today, right? And we're going to go ahead and conduct that poll, and then we will uh, talk about those results into what we get, because I don't think you were really any different than um, anybody else. So if you could just take a couple moments and give us some feedback on that. The first one be what approach are you using to manage your fleet maintenance, right? And it can be just whiteboards or an in-house system was created, maybe a legacy tool, one of the older applications out there. AMCS, we've been in our predecessor companies, we've been doing this since 1979. So we've seen a lot of changes, a lot of different systems, even in our own product offerings, right? So it's a constant state of change, and the rate of change is increasing thanks to primarily Microsoft. Okay. Okay. So
Awesome.
I think we're seeing some of the results here, right? Um, and the first question was what approach, right? So there's a big percentage, which is impressive, right? I mean, this industry has been more. I would say fleet maintenance software has been in this. I came from mass transit, right? It's very similar, heavy duty, hard abuse of equipment. Longer users than a lot of the fleets out there. So some of the more vocational fleets and all, really, it hasn't been done. So it's interesting because we have a large percentage, and that's surprising to me, but maybe not because of this industry, right? Maybe it's something. Things that's really good that many people are using something, right? So it's a good percentage of folks. The next was in-house spreadsheets. That's very common, third party. Um, some, right? And then just a combination, which I think you alluded to earlier, right? You're still going to have some things while while you're in the midst of implementing, and we'll talk about that a little bit, and then a few that aren't managed. So, okay.
And I think part of this really speaks to where the industry is moving. I think everybody, based on the poll, majority realize that you need a dedicated fleet maintenance software. That it goes above and beyond in-house system or spreadsheets, which is probably where Miller was around the time of grabbing AMCS fleet maintenance.
Okay. I think, let me see if that clears off the screen. I'm just waiting for it to update. All right. So let's move on. So the visibility, right? You couldn't see the PMs and things like that. We'll discuss that a little bit further as we go.
Sure.
Let's There we go. We talked about, you briefly mentioned warranty, but let's talk about the challenge with warranty. Miller does a lot of in-house, authorized to do in-house warranty work, as many waste and recycling companies are. You don't want to lose your truck for a long time out to for something simple that you can do and you're authorized to do. So, but what challenges did that pose?
Sure. It's worth the conversation, I believe. It's more of a advanced level of using the system. So this is something you can, or anyone on the call is thinking about grabbing this. This is something that you can build into is your warranty procedures. But one problem here with a lack of a centralized system across all sites, which they use, if you don't have that, what ends up happening, from my observations, is you get inconsistency among your sites. You get confusion with your foundational staff, with your techs and your support staff. They get confused, they get frustrated, and you end up getting these piecemeal reports or piecemeal Frankenstein data set that you grab from these people because it's confusing and because it's inconsistent. And that's kind of the story around our warranty. We had a warranty procedure in place. We had a place to put your warranty into an Excel sheet. But because there wasn't a centralized data set that you could go to, there wasn't an automation pipeline. I'll talk about that later on. Is that you ended up getting a kind of a Frankenstein data set of warranty that, can you trust this or not? You want to trust your data. But it's like I said earlier, when it passes through so many hands and the data is just inputted manually, at some point you got to question. And
Right.
that's kind of where we were at with warranty.
I know you were catching the big warranties, as most fleets do, right? You catch an engine or a transmission or
Right.
a turbo or something big, right? Because everybody's cognizant of that. But it's all the smaller warranties that really add up pretty quickly once you have automation behind it, right? And to make it easy. And you certainly don't want to increase the burden on the technicians or the mechanics or the supervision of the shop. You really do need that to be just like any other work that they do, and then a system. And I know we'll talk about that here in a little bit because I know that's
Yeah.
a big project that Miller is currently working on, is the uh, improvement of the warranty. So,
That's right. And you captured a lot in there, John, that we'll talk about. But I will mention that that's an example of how invisible data or data you're not aware of can creep up into a problem. Um, and the next slide he has up here is a quote that I gave them during an earlier conversation. We simply didn't know what we didn't know. And I mean this in a very practical sense. When your data is fragmented, when you have inconsistent procedures, you're missing the questions that you should be asked. When you have infrastructure in place, and here I'll talk about the pipeline a bit, when you have your infrastructure in place that can take on the automation, you now open up the ability for your staff to start asking questions, providing feedback that actually drive business growth. So one example of this is the warranty. But if you think of your company as your raw data inputs and you want to make those into operational outputs, revenue or actionable items, whereas your raw data here would be technicians working on trucks, warranty submission, is our PM compliance on time. To go from those raw data inputs into organizational change, or more important, revenue, you need that middle pipeline. And you need that middle pipeline to take up as much automation as possible that you're comfortable with so that you can begin thinking about how do those raw inputs affect that revenue. And when
so
your people can do that on the floor, that's where you get your return on investment. Go ahead, John.
right. So you were just answering some of these questions, right? I think through the thing, but my next, question here was going to be, okay, we know we want to change because you were not a poorly run organization. It was a well-run organization and very successful, but you want to get better, right? You want to become more efficient, and be able to do a better job, right? So this wasn't just a software change, right? Because you had things in place, right? This was a real business change that was made, and I will say this because my team led it as far as the most of the deployment. But I want to say this, and then you could speak about these things, is that
Yeah.
it's very important for a good, strong change management process and agent to be in place at a company. Miller had extremely strong support in that area. And we'll talk about that because a company of Miller's size with 45 sites, you just don't change things overnight, right? It takes time to turn a ship that big. And I think that was well done, right? So, uh, and embraced, right? So, here, what are the problems that we needed to do? So I'll let you speak about these a little bit in further.
Certainly. And thanks for nailing that, John. We were a successfully run company across all provinces before AMCS Fleet Maintenance. But one thing that John and I talk about a lot is the comparison should only be against yourself. So if we compare Miller to today from 3 years ago, I mean, the growth speaks for itself, and you'll see some numbers later on down the road. So the comparison to ourselves here really matters and was a big push to why we wanted this. But even within our organization, we Canada's huge, as we all know. We have a lot of geography to cover here, and things can change by province to province, and that can again muddy the data if it's not being centralized through a central location. So number one, you need centralized, trusted data source. That's what AMCS Fleet Maintenance gives you guys. I'm going to jump a little bit to talk about the integrations that are available. Because AMCS Fleet Maintenance has a centralized source of trusted data and they have such strong APIs, you can pull that data out of their system and into your centralized data warehouse, and you do what you see fit with it. This is not to say that AMCS Fleet Maintenance doesn't have all the tools you need. It's a very tooled out system, but they give you the ability to customize it to your organization, which will help with scale. We're seeing that at Miller, that we're able now to grow a little bit beyond just this AMCS Fleet Maintenance, and we can scale up our data decisions from that centralized trusted source. Update in real time, absolutely love that. Our technicians love that. It helps with motivation when someone can complete a preventative maintenance on the floor and they can look up and they see you go from 81% to 82%, right? It's real time. It helps with motivation. People feel like they're doing something. It helps supports the standardization. I've talked about that a little bit. I think that's extremely important as you grow in scale to have standardization and accountability. There's a Goldilocks zone I'll talk about here with change management, where you want to give autonomy to your staff members to do the work they need to get done, but you also want to have guardrails up that they follow the path that you've created, the standardized path that is Miller approved or whatever company you're at. Certainly, I'll cap the slide off by saying this was not a software refresh. This was a cultural change at the company where we needed to build a community that was going to support our staff on this and push this forward in order to get those business results, that revenue, those business actions that I talk about. It was a cultural change that we're currently working through it. We're not at the end, and if I'm being honest with everybody, there probably isn't an end.
Yeah. And I know that you've already seen some changes, like because of the results and the visibility into the data, you've already made improvements just in a short amount of time in your preventive maintenance scheduling and intervals that you're going to run based on what you're seeing. And that's
Absolutely.
great because that'll never be done. As you said, you're just improving against yourself. And it's nice to see like a statistic of what something cost, but even it's probably even more pronounced in the provinces than it is like where I primarily worked is in the States, where we might say we get the same truck in, say, Chicago, same chassis, same body, same everything. And the way we run and maintain that piece of equipment in Chicago is very different than how we would maintain it in, say, Dallas or Houston or Florida or somewhere, right? They may be very different in the operation, and then you can see that and say, okay, yeah, we know that it's very different, in what it costs. And Miller has done a lot with the API and the integrations and all that. And that's what we're after with this version. And there's one thing that's very unique. I mean, we have a classic product that hundreds and hundreds of companies are running, and it is an API, but it's like most APIs. It's limited in its scope. It does what you need to do over the years, as far as the things that you need to integrate with. What we have now, and have had now for 6 years, is a full RESTful API. The entire application sits on top of that API to do everything. So when I say this, I know people don't always believe me until I show it to them, but 100% of what you can see and do in the application is available via the API. That's a very uh, unique design that we make everything available because we want people to be able to integrate. We want to be your truth of data source, right? We want to share that data warehouse with you. We want you to be able to get good information. And by making it easy, we'll talk about that a little further as we go, but by making it easy to get that data captured at the beginning, then you've got a lot you can do with that, right? So
Love it.
with that, the change management, one of the things that you had, and I want to speak about this before we move on, is you had a real veteran of the industry as your uh, person in there doing the work, right? Somebody that knows the industry upside down and backwards. And I think that was tremendous in the success that you had. It actually uh, really surprised me how quickly you were able to do change. Now, as you know, all of the people um, in my group have a 20-year requirement on their experience to be able to come in. They're not going to tell you how to run your business, but they're going to tell you how to best optimize and configure a piece of software to achieve your goals, considering what you're up against, right? And that's what we do. And when you have a really good Miller's one of the best working relationships I've had in some years. We do a lot of deployments. I mean, we currently have 80 some deployments going projects, right? We have a lot happening all the time. But this was one where it was a big opportunity across a large area to make a big change, and really, it's really extraordinary what's been able to be achieved. And you would see that we did send that information out in a previous um, review that you did with us, right? And we're going to continue to go through that. That's one of the great things and follow this journey because it really is. That sounds kind of cliche, right? A journey, but it really is. You're never going to be done. You're always going to be changing. Um, and so I wanted to kind of review a little bit of that, right?
Sure.
What did we do? How did we go across it? And I'll let you speak to that.
So first, I'll say that the team at AMCS Fleet Maintenance was phenomenal in the implementation. I built John. We worked with you. We worked with Dean. I apologize, I can't remember Dean's last name, but he was fantastic. There was another individual that we used. John mentioned him, and that's Todd Castleman. He said he was gonna pop into the webinar today. So Todd, if you're hello, I deeply appreciate everything you've done here at Miller. For everyone listening, Todd was instrumental in implementing AMCS Fleet Maintenance at Miller. He was instrumental in teaching me the software and getting me onboarded with it. Um, hey, Todd. So if anyone has any ever questions about it, even within the industry itself, I can't recommend him enough.
Yeah.
So
And
thanks.
that's really great because Todd was a good the boots on the ground because uh,
Boots on the ground.
Miller was extremely precise in the cutover from facility to facility because your accounting principles were tight, right? And with our financial integration, uh, it's even better now, right? But that was one of the tightest I've ever seen. I mean, we were down to the pennies in converting, storerooms and things of that nature. And that's a lot of work on the ground, right? And you're doing it all while not taking anything offline with the operations. That's very important because the trucks have got to run.
Right.
You got to go out there and, pick up the waste and recycling materials, right?
It
So,
was a
yeah,
huge project, and I'll talk a little bit about it now. First thing I want to say is that the implementation and the adoption are two different things. One, I believe, is harder than the other. Your implementation is going to take a lot of time to get your data migrated into the system. And that's really important. As John just said, you want to go down to your pennies and you want to make sure you get it over there and you get it over there right. You're with AMCS Fleet Maintenance, you're driving a cloud architecture. So that means it's going to live in a centralized location, hopefully for the rest of time, right? So you want to get it in there properly. That's your implementation. Your pilot of the system, that's your implementation. The onboarding piece, that's all of that. The harder piece for this, I will say, is your adoption. And that's the support systems you put in place. That's the engagement you get with your guys on the ground. That's your feedback loops that you implement in your company. The adoption is where you're going to succeed or fail. Is your technicians going to pick this software up and they're going to love it? They're going to use it every day. You're going to trust your data, or are they going to fight it? Do they think that you're, doing some malicious practice by putting this in their hands? You're going to get all that, and you really need to take the time to make sure that adoption and that engagement with your guys is done correctly. Overall,
Yeah.
I will say if that change management is done right, and I can talk a bit about that if we have time, the technicians, the feedback I get from my techs, and I engage with these guys all the time. Once they realize how easy the system is and they have it in their hands, right? They realize how much faster they can move, how much more autonomy it gives them on their decisions in the shop, and how better your small teams can work. And that's really where you get your return on investment with this software is your small agile teams at the shop level can move around way more efficient with the autonomy they need to make the decisions they need. And this goes back to that analogy I made earlier where you want to give them a path to follow, but they can make decisions within that path. That's their autonomy. But the guardrails are up, and that's your system, AMCS Fleet Maintenance, how you configure your system, that they can't get out of that centralized path that you created for them. So there's a Goldilocks zone that I believe we're trying to achieve, and we are achieving to some extent, where you put those guardrails up to get your standardized procedures, but you also give them the autonomy to make the decisions at their site, which enables them to be efficient and agile. And that's where you really get your return on investment for this.
What concerns did you have on technician adoption? I mean,
Yeah.
you've been very successful, but what were your concerns going into this?
So that's really, really great question. I could probably talk about that one for an hour. I onboarded every single one of our technicians. I put a tablet in every single one of their hands. I can tell you exactly what you're going to get. Some portion of the people, maybe 50%, are like, yeah, I love it. I'm going to take it. I'm going to run with it. Those are great. There's a lot of people that are going to resist it. That's just going to happen with change. And so the biggest concern I had was the resistance, the fear that we are trying to observe them in their day-to-day hourly basis, which is just, I mean, crazy when you break it down for them. Like, do you think there's somebody in our ivory tower looking at you minute to minute? But that is the fear you get, and that's the resistance you get. The solution here is community, it's feedback, and it's checking in, checking in, checking in. That's the adoption portion. That's the hardest part. Go to your technician. Hey, how's AMCS Fleet Maintenance going for you? And they look at you and say, oh, I hate it. That's an emotional response. It's not a response you can take any feedback from. And that's where you need to focus on with your adoption. Okay, what are the frustrations you're having with the system? Get them to explain it. Maybe there is a piece of feedback that you can take back to your central team and then call up John and ask him what's some changes we can make. Or maybe it's a piece of feedback that just needs to be heard and the change management is going to come later down the line. The point that I'm trying to make here is that check in with them, check in with them, and check in with them. That's how we made it work.
And it's a challenge, right? When you're going from paper to, electronic. And the one of the ways that we work through this, right? And you're right, nobody's probably going to micromanage them down to a minute or something like this. But and we'll talk about it a little bit when we get down to the productivity here in a bit. But the one thing that I've used, and it's worked over the years because it's the truth, right? And I think people deserve the truth and not trying to ram something down their throat that's just corporate mess, is you need to know what that truck cost per hour to maintain. You must know that. If you don't have accurate information, then how can you bid contracts? How can you be sure that the company's sound financially, or in our government and utility operations that you're within budget, right? I mean, you have to know those things. You can't have those surprises. And so, whether your people are working or not, right? Okay, yeah, you're working, but if I only tell you where 50% of my time is going, then you don't know where that went. So it makes your cost per hour look artificially low, right? And we know that in your, your industry. I just did a story on this back in January, right? And it actually shocked me. And it said the nationwide, the average in North America for like a front loader is pure maintenance is 65 to $85 an hour per operational hour that you have of that piece of equipment. That's mind blowing, right? And that's a number that holds up, right? And you know, some are going to be at the low end, some are going to be at the high end, depending. Some might be over that, depending on the age of the fleet. But when you're talking about a piece of equipment that might go out there and run 10 hours, and you split the middle, they say that's our $750 today just for maintenance costs. And we know we've done many webinars, right? We know that maintenance parts and labor are up well over 40% since 2020, and that's a lot, right? That's much higher than all the other inflation that we've seen. So yeah, I know and you know, you've done really well with that, right? And I think that the adoption and the quality of your data that we've reviewed um is quite good. So let's talk about, well, this is my favorite subject in the world with maintenance, right? Because preventive maintenance is, if
Yeah.
you do this, right, everything else gets better, right? I mean, it's the primary thing that we ought to be doing, not only for maintaining the, you know, the value of an asset, right, but safety, compliance issues, you know, driver happiness, you know, if there is such, right, trying to at least, you know, keep stuff from breaking down and you know, brand reputation on top of that. So I your results have been pretty amazing, and the dedication that Miller Waste has put into saying we know if we take this PM compliance and we can move the needle, we're going to make a difference. And this is an area when David said, "Oh, okay, the tax," right? Because if you start seeing an improvement here and you start seeing an improvement in the fleet, now they start getting the idea, why do we want to capture all this data? We're not trying to penalize people. We're just trying to do better and to be able to measure it. So I'd like to talk about this because it's a pretty remarkable increase in just 1 year.
Absolutely. And this is one of the first things you want to jump on top of is your preventative maintenance within AMCS Fleet Maintenance. But it's also one that gets discussed probably the most through your feedback channels once you create those. Techs have a lot of opinions on them, which is great when they're reliable. What I will say here is that the PMs themselves, like the checklists that we go through, hasn't really changed between before AMC's Fleet Maintenance and now. But what's changed is everything else: the scheduling, the measurability, the predictability, the ability to achieve the performance indicators we set out. All that other stuff has changed because we have centralized tracking, centralized reporting, and as I said earlier, and a mentor told me once, is the data is the data. So what I mean by that is you trust your data. You take a look at your preventive maintenance graph, and if it's not where you want it to be, a knee-jerk reaction I've seen in this industry is to start explaining why. Where I would recommend, and what we've done at Miller is we've stopped that, we've trusted our data, and then we've gone from there. And that's really how we push these PMs numbers up, is instead of trying to make excuses or change what the numbers look like, we trust in that centralized data location. The data is the data. Okay, what can we do as an operation to increase these numbers? And this graph kind of tells that story a little bit. You can see the months that we went in and we modified how the PMs are scheduled. You get a little drop during those months because you have a bit of change. But every time we've done a change, you can see that we get a higher and higher increase in the PMs. And that's that change management. That's that adoption. That's that feedback framework that I'm discussing, where you get your raw data inputs, technicians working on the shop floor for PMs. You get your pipeline, AMCS Fleet Maintenance, which automates a lot of it for you. And you get your operational outcomes, which is a higher PM compliance number. That middle portion, that pipeline, is what AMCS Fleet Maintenance does for us. A lot of it is automated. A lot of technicians love the fact that it's predictable and you can schedule it.
Right. And then we did introduce something with this version that it's a change. It's a big change in the way people think about scheduling maintenance. And I wanted to take a couple minutes and talk about that. The first one is we always thought about something like, especially in this industry, like it's mostly based on hours, right? When are we going to do the maintenance? It's every 250 hours, 500,000, whatever it might be, right? And then you would say, okay, I know the truck runs, and it would all the reporting and all the analysis there was looking at how many hours are we till it's due, or is it overdue, or whatever, right? We still have all of that. But what we've done is, especially when you have the telematics connected, like you guys have for the meter readings, and more
Right.
people do, we will update the due date, the forecasted due date. We do that every 10 minutes. We look for any meter changes that have happened, and we get the telematics every hour. So what that means for the operational, especially when you're sharing something with operations, like when do I need these pieces of equipment? Now we're kind of changing the way people think to say, and they can depend on that date. It's not with conjunction of getting a meter reading every hour that that piece of equipment runs. That becomes, and it bases it on last year's utilization of it, right? It becomes a very accurate date that you're going to want to, to do that preventive maintenance. And the other side of it is, and it'll be coming this way. It's something that I worked on for 3 years with the Technology Maintenance Council, was the codes where the trucks are going to be given us those codes, the code key 25, right? So
Right.
we'll as that moves on, right? But it's an impressive ability. And the other thing with the fleet with PMs is, the first thing that, in the sales cycle, somebody says, well, what's my return going to be on this? What's the investment, right? The cost of your software subscription is minuscule compared to the investment of labor that Miller has put into it, right? From like where you said, in the operational side, the inventory side, the mechanics. So, what happens is when you weren't doing those maintenance things, sometimes that first year that cost is going to escalate, right? Before it flattens out and becomes stable, right? But the the returns that you've gotten, I mean, the investment that Miller had to make in the processes, in the change management and all of that, and that's never really going to be done, right? The initial wave certainly isn't, bringing on new people is easy enough, but what's going to be the next thing that you're going to tackle, right? This is where I think when we come back to the technicians, I mean, I came from that world. In my early career, I was a transit bus electrician, right? So I was thinking, what could I do? And I've always used a piece of software all the way back to my early days. So I'm very fortunate in that area, right? But we wanted to make sure that we had a mobile app. AMCS has had a mobile app since 2004. Think about that, 22 years ago. There was no iPhone, there was no Androids, right? We had to do it on Windows Mobile, and it did work, right? But it was always a bolt-on, like every other thing, right? It was an additional piece. When this product was built, the mobile was the first thought. We always design, when it's around a technician or anything that's going to be done, a driver, anything that's going to be done around the mobile. We look at the mobile interface first, and then we look at the web. Now, they are always in the same order. They always stay lockstep. The only thing's different is the size of the piece of glass that you're looking at, the device. But I think this is pretty dramatic. You would maybe expand on it.
Oh, absolutely. The one thing here is it's fundamentally changed how our technicians spend their time in our sites. Generally speaking, less administration time and more wrench time, which is what everybody wants. But I think the most impactful piece here, and I've mentioned this before, is the operational autonomy that it's given our guys. And that's what drives all of these statistics that you see. I mean, 20 minutes to a work order down to 30 seconds it's a real statistic. People who jump on this and they learn it, the mobile side of it, which is, it's not a huge lift to learn the mobile side of it, everyone. You can open up a work order in 30 seconds. Very quick. It gives your staff the autonomy, the ability to make decisions at their site that they need to make very quickly. Agile teams that I'm discussing here. That's what it opens the door for. And if you can really harness proper autonomy in your shops, agile decision making with the guardrails that you put up within the system, that's where you get your productivity. That's where you get your productivity back. It's also worth mentioning at this point that those APIs that we're discussing, the interlinks between different systems, and our AMCS Fleet Maintenance is set up across multiple systems, including Geotab. When you link those systems together in combination with either a strong IT team, or you can even leverage AI. You take manual volume work and you automate it. So something that would have took somebody 1,000 hours can be done in 10 minutes. And that's not a crazy thing to say. Um, it's allowed us here at Miller to manage our assets with a very lean team that have a lot of autonomy over the decisions that they make, and we're seeing that in our numbers.
Right. And that was something that you talk about being able to get clocked in. Yeah, it's two taps on the mobile app to be able to open that task that you're working on to be able to clock in. And when we were, migrating and building a new product, that's one thing about this. We have a long legacy, right? Many years, 47 years doing this. But we wanted to make sure that it was quick. And I know I sat there with the developers in the office and we counted every tap and click to make sure that it was less.
Yeah.
And the work order is that's where most of your time goes, right? Let's face it, your technicians and your mechanics are some of the most expensive people that you're going to have on the operational side, right? And I think that's not going to get any cheaper, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Certainly.
saving that time, and the other thing too is that the results of like more range time, less admin. Think about when you're doing a repair, right? You want to be able to look at that, or like maybe you're doing preventive maintenance, or maybe you're doing a remedial repair. You want to be able to see what was previously done, and that's right there at your fingertips. Nobody has to go and run a report somewhere. Nobody has to go into a shop office and say, "Hey, can you tell me what was done to truck 101?" Because I seem to be having the same problem, right? It's right there, and it'll even filter down to the systems that you're working on. So if you're working on, say, electrical, you can look at it'll default to like 10 to start with, and you can see anything. You can go all the way back in time and see everything that's been done. And it makes it very easy for people to be able to analyze that because with all of the electronics and systems that we have on board, knowing what's been done previously, if something keeps coming back in, it's very good to have that at your fingertips and to be able to see it right in your face. So I think with that, I think that what are the results that you've been doing? You
Mm-hmm.
spoke about it a little bit with the
Yep.
API and the what reduction you've had, but I think this will give you even more data.
So, I mean, you bring up a strong point. I've been calling that click tax, the amount of clicks you have to do in the system. John and I have worked
Yeah.
on that pretty strongly together. I know we have 2 slides left and we're running low on time. I do want to get to the Q&A, so I will probably rush through these a little bit, but I will give you the information that we want. Is that the reporting we have now, we're confident in the data. And this is a change from what I said at the onset of all this. When you bring in the data and you want to make a decision as an organization, as an enterprise, it's no longer a negotiation over the data. Generally speaking, everybody can see the narrative that's within that data because it comes from a centralized place with a central method of getting there and a standard number of procedures that produce that data. So when you put in the work with your change management and with your technicians, you reap those rewards at the operational level when you want to make those decisions. You reap those rewards by getting consistent, clean data so you can make faster and decisions with confidence about your fleet. So that is what fleet maintenance, and this wouldn't have happened if we didn't have the AMCS fleet maintenance software. It has been the centralized anchor that we've pulled from ever since implementing it to make these high level decisions. I think
Right.
one example of that will be the next slide.
Yep. And I'm going to bring you there. That's really impressive though, 40% in reducing and compiling information because it's there, right? That's the big piece. And of course, with the way that this solution works, right? Because we're so tightly integrated with finance now, right? So you don't have to run a bunch of reports and try to, figure out the differences, right? Because it's actually creating those journal entries as you're doing things like closing out a work order and all that. So that data's there. I know you consume it and you can trust it because you know it's not going to change after the fact. So it has uh,
Absolutely.
operational integrity. compared to some of the legacy systems or frankly, even some of our legacy systems, right? Because it was from a different generation when you could change things, right? So anyway, this is another one. This is another very impressive result. And I want to tee this up just a little bit for David because you've got a powerhouse of a warranty administrator that you brought in, and that's great, right? It's amazing. But obviously you need something that's going to provide you consistent data without putting more burden on your very expensive technicians and shop supervision and everybody else. And I know you've just getting started on this, and to just let everybody know on this, I mean, at the time when we started looking at this, we still have another 800 trucks to establish the warranties because the warranties are complicated on a waste or recycling piece of equipment. Every one of the manufacturers has many warranties, and they need to be set up and evaluated, and sometimes they change from year to year. But the other impressive thing is that you've got, last time I looked, you had about 17,000 master parts to top level catalog.
Yeah.
And you've only established, just because you're trying to go for what's going to get you the most, you've got 200 or so warranties established on those. But I want you to speak to what you've been able to accomplish in an incredibly short amount of time.
It's a process. It's such a huge process to get these pipelines off the ground, right? And there's a theme I'm talking about here. AMCS Fleet Maintenance really develops that automation pipeline for you, and I'll talk about that with warranty. Previously, we had some warranty structures in place, certainly did, but nothing truly automated. So that means it was up to our technicians, shop staff to keep up with what is warranty, what parts are warranty, where do you put the warranty, when do you open a claim, how do you open the claim. All of that was on the shop staff to organize and to maintain. That's fine when you're dealing with one or two shops, but when you start to grow and you're at scale and you want to standardize across the board, you need that centralized automated pipeline that's there for you. And that's what we've leveraged to get these numbers. AMCS Fleet Maintenance has an automated way to generate the warranty claim based on the work order or the work that was done on that work order. It will automate that claim for us. We leverage that. I'm not trying to sell this short. It's a huge, there's a huge number of data that needs to get up in the system for that to work. But if you put the time in and you put in those change management, feedback, support groups that I chatted about earlier, these are the numbers that we're receiving only a couple months after fully launching. So technicians no longer need to track warranties. There no longer needs to be a binder in your shop or a decal on your truck that tells you. The system will surface it for you. The system will tell you, if you set it up properly, what is warranty and what is not warranty. And then once you get that automated pipeline going, then you can start honing in on those operational outcomes that you really want to look at for revenue, right? And that's that centralized piece that I keep bringing up. That's the piece that we've been able to leverage with AMCS Fleet Maintenance to get us those operational outcomes.
Right. And I wanted to speak. So we've done all this, and I'd like to take a quick look at the numbers. It's been pretty amazing in a fairly short amount of time of what Miller Waste has been able to accomplish.
Right. Yep. So again, I don't want to. We're not perfect. We're not perfect, guys. It's been a struggle. There's been lots of struggles along this way. It's been very difficult, but we've persisted. We've listened to our staff. We've modified when necessary. AMCS Fleet Maintenance have been a fantastic partner with that. And when you put that work in, when you put that change management, you focus on the adoption, these are the numbers that you get out. These are our actual numbers since going live with them. So it's not easy. It's certainly not easy. I don't want to undersell it, but it is worth the time and investment to get a centralized system for your data.
Yeah, the reduction in cost to me is amazing at the size your company is, right? To see it, because like what we often see is initially the cost will go up a little bit because you weren't doing certain preventive maintenance that you should have been doing, right? Whether that's to preserve warranty or safety or a combination of that, right? Because you're going to establish whatever preventive maintenance cycles you want, right? So sometimes if you weren't doing them and you start doing them, obviously you're going to have increased cost, right? But to be able to lower the cost in 12 months, some of that went in that you had a good inventory to start with, so you weren't in a really bad area there, and then you could just leverage it and manage that inventory in reorders and that sort of thing, right? And
Oh, yeah.
that, the warranty success rate is really good, and I spoke about that because you have a really I I love it when a company will spend what they need to spend to get a meat eater, as I call it. You have to be very discipline to be able to go. It's just like filing an insurance claim, right? You got to do it. We're going to give you all the facts, and they are going to be facts, and they're not false claims because those claims are made up based on the metrics that the warranty is supposed to cover, right? So you have confidence in it that that's done. But to get an 83 success rate back, I mean, the some of the manufacturers would be happy if they could get away with you being happy with 50% success rate in
Right.
claims, right? So that's pretty impressive as well. And then, with your feedback, we've added a new thing, which is kind of new in our space, and that's cost avoidance on warranties, right? So not just what did you actually get back, but if you did have to send it to the dealer, what was the value of that work that they did so that you can evaluate whether you want a warranty or not. And then I think the API, I know you use it. Once we turn somebody loose with it, we do the training. We really don't know unless we have our meetings.
Yeah.
I know some of the stuff you've done, but 700 hours is impressive.
And honestly, I mean, you could probably double that now. And I'm not being fictitious with that. Our IT team loves the API. John, you're available whenever we need questions, but they're pretty much running with it. And we can do large scale changes to 2,000 assets within a day with one person managing it, right? Lean teams, that's 700 hours of manual work taken up by the API is a true stat. One that's probably lowballed at the moment, I would actually say.
Yep. And it's good because you're protected. It's not like you're running a script inside of a database and somebody says, "Oops, I made a mistake," right? The API follows all the business rules that the interface follows as well. It's what enforces them. So, David, I really appreciate all what you've had so far. We do have some questions that I know we want to try to answer. We're getting close on our time here, but I think we have a couple. Let me see um, if we have those. So one of them we had was, what about do we break down how much the cost per hour? So yes, so the cost per hour is a key metric in this industry. Obviously we do, and we do that for the month, year, life of a piece of equipment, right? Or grouped or whatever you want to see. Maybe you want to see a certain line of business. What's our cost per hour? But we also obviously do kilometers and miles. But we started doing something new 5 or 6 years ago, and now we do cost based on business metrics. Now, I don't think that Miller's gotten there yet, and frankly, most people haven't. But like in your business, one of the things you do is you pick up recycling, let's say. Well, what's the maintenance cost per hour per ton of recycled material that truck picks up, right? And you know that from some of our systems that can say, okay, the truck either it went through the scale or the truck has its onboard scales, right? And we can now do those incremental meters, say that this truck today picked up 15 tons or whatever it did. And we know that, right? So instead of having to send that information out, do it in a spreadsheet and come up with what's your cost for your business metric there, we can do that. We do the same for, all the other industries, like dairy, it's, gallon of milk or whatever it might be, or cases of beer in that industry, right? So different ones, we do it a little differently. Let me see if we got a couple minutes here. Uh, David, do you have any numbers on the increase in the fleet availability now that your PM compliance has gone up? I don't know if
You
you.
know, I don't want to oversell it. That's a big movement for the next couple months here at Miller is to get a dashboard created for that purpose. So I don't have the stats at the moment. The data's there. It's available. We just got to develop it. I can tell you that we have had a much easier time with our spare ratios and deciding where our spare ratios should go in our fleet.
Right. We have another question here, and I'll answer it. Says, do we have an average industry cost per hour across all service lines?
Okay.
Um, you know, we at AMCS can't share that data across customers because of confidentiality, right? And so that's not something that we can share. But I will tell you this, that um, and I haven't, when I pulled the data, I pulled some reports to find out people that were giving us that information or people that were willing to share. But the real challenge is something that, like David mentioned to earlier. One of his provinces may have a lot of hills. They may use more brakes, more fuel, whatever, right? For that same exact truck that runs in another province, right? So you've got to be very careful when you're comparing yourself to somebody else. It is good
Right.
to know it, right? And of course, your labor cost and your parts cost and everything else. So if you start with yourself and then look at it, there is information out there. It's more scarce in this than it is in the over-the-road trucking. There are some studies on that. Uh, but um, you will learn yours, that's for sure, as time goes.
Comparison to yourself, absolutely.
And another one was like, is AMCS, do we pursue maintenance at management at landfills? So we've done that for 47 years. What changed in 2000 was the VMRS, the Vehicle Maintenance Reporting Standard codes, picked up things other than just trucks. So, for instance, the waste compaction bodies are on there, the MRFs are on there, bulldozers are there, buses are there, right? It went and became a system not just for the trucking industry, like when it started in 1969. So that's a mainstay of what we do. We do everything but aircraft in the sky. We do ground equipment aircraft, we do marine, we do ferries, we do pretty much anything that's maintenance related, except if it's a something flying in the air. We're not in that space. But outside of that, yes, we do a great job with that. And we're run over. I'm so sorry. We need to probably track it up. And if we've got any other questions, we'll try to reach out to you and answer those.
Yeah, thank you both so much for the discussion today. That was great. As a reminder to everybody, a recording of this event will be sent out within 5 to 7 business days. And like John said, if we didn't get to your question live today, AMCS will certainly follow up with you afterward and answer those questions. Also, when this webinar ends, a brief survey will be launched on your screen. So we encourage you to take that survey and provide us with some feedback on the webinar. We hope that you enjoy us at one of our upcoming webinars or one of our upcoming conferences. We're just about 2 weeks away from our Organics Recycling Conference and Battery and Universal Waste Recycling Conference held in Nashville. So still spots available for that. So be sure to register if you haven't already. And registration is also live for all of our events this year. So you can visit recyclingtodayevents.com, take advantage of some early bird rates there. And thank you once again for attending today's webinar. And we hope you have a good rest of your day.